It is my honor to introduce the next panel of Indigenous doctors, each of whom works to support Indigenous communities to maintain health and wellness. One of the things that we will be hearing about is the important ways that these doctors combine their knowledge of Indigenous medicine with Western knowledge to healing and wellness. This panel is titled Health and Healing in the Search of Recovery of Missing Children. And so I'd like to ask Dr. James Makokis from Kihiwin Health Center, which is located in Alberta, to come to the stage, and Dr. Marcia Anderson, who is the Vice Dean, Indigenous Health, Social Justice and Anti-Racism at the University of Manitoba in the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences. So please welcome them, and let's put our hands together and do that. So they're debating on who's going to go first, and I think Marcia won. So we're going to ask James to come up. So welcome, James, Dr. James Makokis. Can I get a clicker up at the front here? I knew I was looking for that clicker all over the place. You know, when you lose something in the couch, I was looking in those chairs and those cracks and crannies, and I couldn't find it. So, yeah. So I think somebody is bringing us one. So that's awesome. But I usually don't find anything like that. I usually find money. That's a good thing. All right, here we go. All right, James, you have the stage.
Thank you so much. So tanse tatamskat nawao ka kio ni tu temtik ke gwa nawa ko makantik ki heo ka pa pemote te gwa mastigwaskik na pesis noi hoen onix koponi kochinia e atoskian kino kamasik ke gwa ameskochi waskai ganek niwi gen sasani maskek sik e gwa inotepik squetaman ni hiawe win. So it's so good to be here with you all today. I lost the rock, paper, scissors with Dr. Anders. So I'm going first. I just introduced myself in Nehiawewin. I'm a second language Plains Cree speaker and learner of our language. And I just want to share a little bit about the work that we do in our nation and also around intergenerational trauma and healing from our own family perspective. So I just want to acknowledge my teachers, many of whom are here, and a lot of whom have passed away. So when we think of the legacy of residential schools, part of that is we don't live as long of a life, a long, full, happy life, as we used to a long time ago. And when I was in medical school and university, I would spend a lot of time with the people in these pictures and go learn from them, go learn medicines, go learn songs, go learn how to take care of myself so that I can help others. And most of them have passed away now. So I think in terms of this topic today, that we're all impacted by that. And it's also our role and responsibility to ensure the continuity of our knowledge systems and teachings and things that were gifted and blessed to us by many of our elders and knowledge holders that we have here. So I just want to acknowledge them. And in terms of this particular topic, over the past year, I really started to look in our own family and see how residential schools has impacted us, because we kind of grew up hearing about it as younger people, but my dad and aunts and uncles never really talked about their experience. And so in this picture, you can see from the late 1800s, my tapanak, my great-grandparents on my paternal side, attended residential school, which would have been the Blue Quills Residential School or around that area where we're from in Treaty 6. And then my Muslim Vernon and my Cookham Alice Makokis from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation dad is the little boy in the black and white picture, and my auntie, Dr. Leona Makokis, is standing behind him. And all of their brothers and sisters, so all of my aunts and uncles attended those schools too. And my sister and I, our generation, born in the late 70s, early 80s, are one of the first generations not to attend residential school. So when I think about that impact on our family over 100 years, in the situation that our people and our communities were forced to live under, such horrible, awful states of genocide, the past system, this system, where we heard those stories of really difficult things that happened when they spoke Nehiyawe, when needles would be put through their tongues, and or everything that they witnessed as children. And in our societies, we do everything to protect children and to ensure that their little spirits can grow and shine as bright as possible. So myself and my little nephew on the bottom picture and my sister are the first two generations in our community not to attend residential school. And this is him. So this is my little nephew, my sister's son. His name is Atayukan Asani. He doesn't have an English name. He only has a Cree name. And in our family, with our own healing, that's what we're doing, is addressing all of those things that we never had a chance to experience as children or as young people, and ensuring that Atayo has all of those opportunities to be put back onto that Wikasko Meskino, that Miko Meskino, that sweetgrass path or that red road, that every single one of our children before this violation of the way we raise children would have experienced and grown into those healthy, whole human beings. So this is in the pandemic, and we're learning as a family how to make birch syrup, which is really good if you're drinking it in the sweat. Drinking the birch water, you can feel the life going down into your body, and we're teaching him how to do that. This is a graph that was created by elders at CP Takenep, Blue Quills Residential School, and it outlines what our societies looked like before residential school. And what I just want to point out is in the middle were our awasak, egwahkiteyak, our children and our elders, and they were surrounded by various levels of protection. And in that center is where knowledge translation, education took place, learning took place, and that they were protected by all of those people within our nations and societies around them to ensure that knowledge transfer takes place. And so here in our societies, children grew up to be healthy, whole human beings, Aisinuak, to know what their role and purpose was. And my grandfather teaches me about symbols on the land and symbols that are related to our spirituality, our identity, and knowledge. That creator Emasanaiket Umaski wrote those symbols for us on the land so we would know who we are in terms of our education system. And here's a symbol of the grandmother, Notukwe Otayukan, in the woman's pipe teachings. She's, as I understand it from my aunties who teach me about these things, she's the main grandmother that calls all the other spiritual grandmothers in our ceremonies. And you can see an image of her here in the mountain with her hair going back and her face and her body. In front of that mountain, there's this one. And I think there's the arrow that's pointing at where I want you to look at. And we can see there's another symbol of a face, but this one is a baby's face, symbolizing that child, the next generation, that those spiritual grandmothers and grandfathers are looking towards to protect and look after. In this one, in front of that child mountain, the symbol of the child, there's this Kisenapewasini Kisenu, the kind old man mountain. And this one is in front of that little boy mountain. So if we look back at our governance structure, the symbol of those children and elders in the middle of our societies are also on the land, where the grandmothers are looking forward to the next generation and the grandfathers are also helping the spiritual grandmothers and grandfathers, but also those Kokoms, Muslims, and Tapanak in our community that help to raise children to be who they are. And in our ceremonies, our Chichigeona, it teaches us about Wahkotuin, how we're related to everything, the wing clans, the animal clans, the medicinal plants, how our organs and bodies are made from those, but also Wahkumtuin, how we're related to our physical human relations by blood. And this was at the end of a Mistatemasimuin ceremony where we adopted one of our actually Indigenous doctors who's from the Blackfoot Nation. So people who say that Blackfoots and Crees don't get along is not true. We can get along. And we adopted her into our family because she lost her parents. And that's what we do as, community and nation, is take in those people who have lost those important people in their family. And these are all elders that we would learn about the horse dance from, which is involved in healing. If those of you have been to one, you walk around the lodge after where the horses, who are the symbol of the Piesuak, the Thunderbird, bring that healing to our people. And when we look at our families, Peakoheomak, the way that we raise children, Opikanawasuin, in the past took a lot of people. This is my little nephew with my sister, who's a single mom. And me, my husband, my mom and dad, and his mom, all looking after raising him as supporting him. Because we know that it takes at least 4 healthy adults to raise a healthy child. And in the way that I understand our child rearing system in the past, we would space our children out every 4 to 7 years so that they would be able to walk and look after themselves and help while we're living like in -21 or whatever it is here right now, and so that they can be self-sufficient too. And when we think about the impact that colonization and residential schools has had on our family, which has been the systematic dismantling of our family unit and structures and governance structures, we see it in the taking apart of our families, where all of those institutions that we had to protect, those layers of protection that we had to protect our elders and children, were replaced by colonial institutions violently through genocidal policies that still continue to impact us to today. So every single one of those systems, gatherers, for example, have been replaced by welfare, extended families by social services. We see in Alberta, 75% of children in care are First Nations, for example. And with that disruption, these are some of the things we're talking about today. In those residential schools, the more adverse experiences that children had growing up, the more likely they are to experience an early death. So those elders that would have lived to 115, 100 years old, a young elder would be 90 years old, or 75 would be an extremely young elder, that we have compressed time with them now as younger generations because we're dying because of those adverse childhood experiences that were imposed and funded by the government and ran by churches. And so when we look at those adverse childhood experiences, which is called the ACE study, these are some of the questions that we ask people. And there's about 10 questions. And most of my patients would say yes to all of these questions. So an example of one is, the child or teen witnessed a person in the household being pushed, grabbed, hit, or physically threatened. And then there's other questions. And most of the people in the communities that I work would answer almost yes to 100% of these questions, which increases the risk for all of these illnesses, mental health illnesses, physical illnesses, and leading to early death. The more of those questions that are answered yes, the more likely somebody will have depression, anxiety, suicidality, chronic disease like diabetes or high blood pressure, because our stress hormones are going off, our cortisol levels are going up, and that affects our blood sugars, our cholesterol, and our blood pressure, and all of these sorts of things. And here I think is what we're talking about. How do we break that intergenerational trauma to create intergenerational healing? And we see that, this person is being called stupid, then they're saying you're not good enough to their child, and then finally that person is stopping it and saying, I love you, kisagit, to their child. And I grew up with my grandmother, only recently did she start saying, kisagit and I love you, my grandson. It took a long time. I would say over and over to her, I love you. And I'd always wonder why she would never say that back to me. And I think about this, how it impacts our ability to have self-expression of our feelings and express ourselves in healthy and positive ways. And with my sister, we had the opportunity to do all of those interventions as she had her son. So, Atayo got sung into the world, and the first language he heard was Nehiawewin, that would start to program his brain in that way that our languages do. And that's the importance of our language. And he was given his Uihuin, his Cree name. Our ceremonies are really important in addressing all of these things for many reasons, and I'll go quickly through them. One is we have to iwit and ask for help. We have to be willing to receive help that speaks to our free will that was given to us by Creator. It's done in a space that is loving, that is created a loving space with people that are supportive and want the best for us. And we have to share what is bothering us and let that go, or at least start to address it. And we have to itapuketaman, believe that we will get better with maskikia, medicine, other ways of healing, and it also works at that achak spirit level. In our sweat lodges, in our ceremonies, all of our natural laws are found in everything that we do. Honesty, sharing, kindness, strength, and determination that connects us to that sweetgrass trail or path and puts us back onto that healing way. And in these spaces, we have an opportunity to address that trauma, which is found in our limbic system. So in our brain, we have our amygdala, which is where our emotions are most commonly stored, which is directly connected to our hippocampus, which is where our memories are stored. And when we go into these healing spaces, we can access those traumatic memories in that loving, supportive space without having us to be flooded or dissociate or have negative coping mechanisms to deal with that and start to reprogram our brain, which is part of neuroplasticity. And so this is one of the benefits of having access to our ceremonies and healers and medicines as part of our own health systems, which have been systematically dismantled by the Canadian state, and they need to be systematically repaired because it took hundreds of years for us to reach this level of the state of our community. And when we are being triggered, our blood pressure is going up, we're starting to sweat, we're starting to experience that anxious feeling, that feeling in our stomach when we get those nerves. All of these things are happening, and we can either go on a downward spiral to the point of self-harm and depression and cutting and suicide, or coping with those emotions by using alcohol or drugs, or we can learn how to control and work with those emotions and feel them in an upward spiral. And that really speaks to how we do need to work from a trauma-informed perspective to address trauma, and that it takes time to heal. Like working with hides. When we're working with hides, we're doing a repetitive motion over and over again with that muswa that is a teacher to us in one of our first clans, and we're having the chance to work side by side with people and talk and dialogue and work on something physical together, much like EMDR therapy when people are working through trauma and they're tapping, for example, because it connects us from our mental part of our body to our physical part of our body and keeps us in our bodies. And when we do those things, we have good memories, like the smell of home-tanned hide, that when you smell that, you smell those moccasins your kukum or your chapan made, it brings you to those good memories in your limbic system, and you start to create positive experiences that are a part of healing. And these are why our activities, our ceremonies, what we do are important, including drumming. All the symbols for drumming of the heartbeat of Mother Earth, of how it reminds us of being in utero, safe within our mother's womb. And when we look at studies of soldiers who have experienced PTSD, they have an increased sense of openness, togetherness, belonging, sharing, connectedness. And when we do this together with our songs that connect us to our creation teachings, it does that. So intergenerational healing takes time. It takes a lot of effort, and it can be done. This is us, my dad is teaching Atayo how to be an oskapeo in the Cree language that literally means a new man, right? When we are doing these things, it helps create the boldest and brightest version of ourselves. And all of our ceremonial activities are health interventions that keep us on that sweetgrass path, because we need more of these little guys like Atayo with my little stethoscope on. So thank you so much. I think I went a little bit over. Sorry, Marcia. And we're going to leave time for a discussion after. Hi.
Thank you, James. I'm now going to ask Dr. Marcia Anderson to come to the podium. So let's put our hands together and welcome her.
Matakia pe pate dutwa makiaye chante washte nape chizapaye. I'm Marcia Anderson. I'm Korean Anishinaabe. I'm from here. So nice to see some of my friends and relatives in the crowd. I grew up in the North End. My dad is registered with Peguis. That's where they were reinstated after Bill C-35. My grandpa was non-status. He was from Norway House, and we're continuing to learn more about all of the connections in that line and all the relatives and community connections that we have. As a physician, I practice both public health and internal medicine, mainly cardiology. So this morning I was in my clinic, mostly talking to people about their hearts. And later today, after this, I'm going over to 9 Circles to do some media in advance of World AIDS Day tomorrow, where we'll be talking about the impact of HIV, particularly on our relatives. And as I was thinking about today, one of the things that I would hope to get across tomorrow, and when we hear about the new HIV cases and how our relatives are being impacted, is that these are related, that it's not fair, it's incredibly unjust, the many different ways that we are still dealing with the violence of the genocide from Indian residential schools and all of the related assimilationist policies of this state. And I was, in preparing for today, I was thinking about all the different people who are experiencing grief and have been re-traumatized by the news of the unmarked graves and the work that is going to happen. And I was thinking about survivors. I was thinking about the relatives and the friends of the kids who died, were murdered, and never returned home. I think about the workers who are going to organize the searches or participate in the searches and how that's going to feel and the weight that they'll be carrying. Think about the health providers in the community, including the elders and knowledge keepers and traditional health providers, as well as, doctors and nurses like myself. And I think about all the community leaders and the calls that they're going to be getting for supports and planning different supports for all the people who are getting impacted by this. And I was reflecting on how we are all going to experience this based on how we've experienced things already and everything else that we're experiencing right now. So we've all been through this pandemic where we saw our relatives be more impacted, have more severe illness, die at younger ages because of the impacts of colonization on housing and healthcare. We think about the grief that we've had from how the toxic drug supply and opioid overdoses have also impacted our relatives more. I think about folks who have had access to the kind of intergenerational healing and spaces that James and his family have, and my family. I feel very fortunate for the support of the elders and relatives that I have. And I think about the people who experienced the 60s scoop or child welfare and haven't had those spaces or haven't had that access to culture-based healing and strong cultural identity yet, and how this might be for them. When I got my Dakota name about 10 years ago in the Inipi or the Sweat Lodge, my name is Red Buffalo Woman in English. And there was one of the teachings we were provided was how, like the governance circle James showed, that buffalo circle those who are weaker, who might be sick or older, or the young ones, when there is any kind of threat. And I was thinking about how, as our communities and our relatives go through this time of searching for unmarked graves and some of the repatriation that's happening from universities or museums, for example, that there are going to be times when people are okay to be on the outside of that circle. But everybody is also going to need time when they step out from the outside and go on the inside and be the ones who are getting supported and loved and receiving that healing and nurturing care. And that is a sign of strength too, to know when you need to step into the middle and be the one who is receiving the care. And so I was thinking on the way here about who might be less likely to ask for that kind of help. And sometimes we hear about men not wanting to reach out because of some of the harmful masculinity type teachings. Sometimes women might not ask for help because they're so busy taking care of everybody else that they forget to make the space to take care of themselves. Sometimes our two-spirit or trans or gender diverse relatives might not be safe to ask for help because they've not ever had safe space that respected fully who they are in asking for help. And so I wanted to note that people are going to make the best choices that they can in any given moment when it comes to dealing with this grief or trauma, okay? They're going to make the best choice that they can based on what they have access to and what's available to them. And part of the planning that I would look at is what is the whole range of supports that can keep people safe while they make those choices, Some of the things that we might see is some people are going to be relatively okay. They're going to be on a healing journey already with support from knowledge keepers and elders and ceremonial spaces and good health providers and good family supports. And so when they're feeling extra down or carrying a lot of the grief or trauma or caring for others, they're going to have supports to be able to rely on too. And that's beautiful. Some other people might not have that. And we might actually see an increase in substance use, which is scary when we think about the toxic drug supply that we have. We might see that there's more relationship stress and that there might be some more violence in relationships. We might see that people have sleep disturbances and get really overtired and fatigued. People might have changes in their eating or exercise habits. They might have more difficulty keeping up with their medications or taking them every day. There might be mental health impacts. All of these might be things that we see as different communities undertake this process of looking for the unmarked graves. And then as my colleague James said, there's other things that are going to happen with our stress hormones that might mean that if we have diabetes, our blood sugars go out of control and become harder to control, or our blood pressure, or people might have chest pain. And I can tell you it's really hard to tell if chest pain is angina or a heart attack, or if it's grief and trauma and stress and time. And so we need to make sure people have options to get that health care too. And so, you know, I think as we're planning for the kind of healing, that primary understanding of healing, which is rooted in strong cultural identity and healthy family and community connections and ceremonial spaces that accept us and meet us where we are at, have to be our primary resource. And James really talked about that well. And also, we need to be able to meet people where they're at with loving supports that keep them safe. So I'd really strongly encourage us to think about and have available safe consumption supplies, including safe needle exchanges, bubble pipes for meth, things like that that keep our relatives safe. That we think about supervised injection sites, which can, in addition to preventing harm from overdoses, can be really important sites to help connect in a trusting and loving way to other aspects of care. That we think about drug testing and supporting peer networks, so there's that sense of safety, and that can be really important for helping to connect to ceremonial spaces that are known to be grounded in harm reduction and this kind of loving, safe support too. And I'm really thankful for the teachings I've had from Leslie Spillett around ceremony as harm reduction and making space for our relatives who use drugs in ceremonial spaces too. And then to think about the primary care needs too, right? So we might need to plan to have more nurses and doctors and resources like that in community if people need help with titrating or adjusting their diabetes medications or their blood pressure medications, or they need mental health support, or you know they do have that chest pain and they need to be properly assessed. And so as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about all of that, right? Like the primary focus being intergenerational healing grounded in cultural identity and our own ways of health and healing, and also harm reduction and Western medicine supports as we deal with some of those intergenerational harms. So that was all that I wanted to share. I'm very honored to have been asked, and I think that will open it up for dialogue now. Matakasan.
Thank you. I love how we are in a spiritual space and how we are now talking a little bit about taking care of ourselves, our physical self as well, and how as Indigenous doctors you are blending our Indigenous knowledge and Western medicine in that way. So I'd like to open the floor for some questions. I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there, and I'm hoping, don't be shy. I think there's a lot to sort of unpack, and I think the difference I see right now in how medicine is sort of in the Indigenous way is sort of proceeding. Is really about sort of moving forward and blending those our spiritual and our physical being in this space. So I'd like to open the floor. Is there anybody that has any questions or I might have one. Recognizing the work that you do, what are some of the barriers that you see that our communities are experiencing when they're trying to move forward and do their healing? So maybe I can open up that question.
So I think that sometimes there are external barriers and sometimes there are more internal or community barriers. And so externally, for sure, the fact that the funding gets poured into the Western healthcare system, led mainly by non-Indigenous people who don't have the same respect or knowledge of the traditional health systems, is a barrier to really having Indigenous-led, culture-led, knowledge keeper-led health systems and access. I just don't think we have the same priority or resources to support that. Also, I think about the impact of the global health workforce shortage, which absolutely impacts healthcare in our communities too, when people need those forms of healthcare. And then internally, I do think sometimes the disruption that came through the church and how that contributes to different kinds of shame and stigma and judgment in the communities has been a barrier sometimes to harm reduction based approaches, or to things like knowing one's HIV status and going for STBBI testing and getting sexual health care, which can also have been influenced by experiences of sexual violence in the past. And so there are definitely a lot of barriers, but I also think it's good whenever we talk about barriers to think about some of the strengths and some of the strong, good work that has been done to try to overcome some of these barriers. And one thing that we have going in Winnipeg right now, led out of Ganiganichek, is the Minopamatsuan Sexual Wellness Lodge, which is a culturally safe space for STBBI testing and treatment. There also are traditional providers there who can do ceremonial support like cedar baths, or provide teachings grounded in our own ways of being and knowing around sexual health, which can be a really important part of intergenerational healing, and community hosts and peer navigators too, who really try to help make it a safe space. And so I think that's a good example of a way to overcome some of those barriers through Indigenous leadership.
James?
Thank you. That's such a good question. I think it's really important to contextualize how much work and effort it takes for individuals, families, and communities to heal and address like over a century of residential schools, over 500 years of colonial violence and genocide, and that we are now coming out of that. And really, it was only because these children were uncovered did we get to this conversation, because for a large part, even though our people were saying this happened, we weren't believed. And so I think, that really needs to be contextualized within the larger Canadian state and diaspora and conversation within this country, is that it took that level of uncovering of children's bodies for us to be able to get here. So listening and affirming other people's stories who have been sharing this for years and years and years really needs to be validated. And also, when we think about the state of our communities presently, we also have to think about how much individual, family, community effort it takes, and how much government support, likewise, that is also going to take to rebuild our own Indigenous health systems, which have been systematically destroyed and dismantled, our own Indigenous education systems, which have been systematically destroyed and dismantled, our family units, our governance systems, our legal systems, all of those things which formed a healthy society. That isn't just going to happen overnight, and is going to take continued and sustained efforts for at least the same amount of time that residential schools were implemented in this country. And at an individual level, I am not fluent in Nehiyawewen, although we are the largest linguistic group in this country, it's at risk of going extinct like many of the other Indigenous languages. And as someone who's 40 in my community, there's maybe 2 people under the age of 40 that speak Cree fluently. And we know that we can't maintain a language if children aren't speaking Cree. So on a personal level, I quit one of my jobs as a physician to make more time in my week to learn Nehiyawewen, because when my dad passes away, who's 73, then the language will be gone immediately in our family. And so that's the level of commitment that we need to be talking about this, for the government to hear that they need to be funding people to attend language camps and immersion. There's only one land-based language Cree camp that I'm aware of in this country, which happens in Sturgeon Lake, Saskatchewan, called Nehiyawewen Language Experience, that every single community should have the opportunity for people to 100% of the time learn their languages, learn medicines, learn who they are, because we know that all of these are protective factors for keeping our people healthy and breaking that cycle of intergenerational trauma and causing intergenerational healing to happen. And so when we look at that, how in the health system, like Dr. Anderson said, our healers, our medicine people, our elders are not funded by the government. It's an add-on. Every single one of, our nation should have access, our people should have access to that barrier-free. Every single one of our nations should have our own Indigenous health professionals working in our own way. And there's still very few of us across the country. Every single one of our Indigenous nations should have our own immersion programs, should have our own healing programs, should have our own cultural centers, should have all of these things that are essential for us to revitalize our nationhood and our health systems. And until we see that happening, then I don't see the effort that is required by the federal government that has caused this harm to actually change.
Thank you, James. I think we've heard throughout the conference the need for the resources to be able to actually do the healing at the community level. And I just really appreciate you sort of accentuating that and bringing that more into context, because I think that's a general frustration I see across all nations, is the need for these resources to be able to do that work, and that we actually do that work in our ways. So thank you very much. We have a question over on mic number 3. I hope I got the number right. Please go ahead.
That's number 3.
Just state your name for the record, please.
Okay. My name is Grace Shedler. I am from the Circles for Truth and Reconciliation. The question I have is regarding physicians. And in this country, it has been said that we are getting shorter of doctors all around, across Canada. But my question is, we have physicians that come from all over the country, different countries, that take care of our Indigenous people. And most of the time, they don't understand our culture and the way that we have been raised. What is being done at that level to improve taking care of our Indigenous people in this country?
Thank you for that question. And I would just note that the vast majority of physicians who are trained in Canada also do not get adequate preparation to provide high quality health care that's free of racism to Indigenous peoples. At a national level, some of the work that we've been doing as a collective of Indigenous physicians has been looking at setting standards, so expectations on the medical schools for teaching about, like it says in the TRC calls to action, the history and legacy of residential schools, anti-racism training, cultural safety training, the impacts of the 60s scoop. So that is starting. It's really variable across all 17 medical schools. We've been working with licensing bodies like the Royal College of Physicians of Canada, the College of Family Physicians of Canada, the Medical Council of Canada, to not just set the objectives, but actually start assessing and examining physicians before they get licensed on their knowledge and skills when it comes to providing good care to Indigenous peoples. I think the question for the internationally educated health professionals is a really important one. Right now, to my knowledge, there's no expectation in terms of either training or on the exams for knowledge around what influences Indigenous people's health in Canada or to provide better care. And so with some of the health workforce planning, that's particularly looking at bringing in more internationally educated health professionals. It's really important that the licensing bodies set expectations and training is provided to ensure that the safety of care that Indigenous peoples is increasing throughout this process, but it is a gap.
Thank you for the question. I just want to contextualize that at this point, like, you know, in this country, there's been medical schools for 140 years. So at this point, wherever there are medical schools or nursing schools or pharmacy schools or schools of health science, every single one of our nations and communities should have every single plethora of doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dental hygienists, dentists that are working from our community, for our community, and also in urban spaces, much like our Treaty 6 medicine chest clause or the two-row wampum outlines and articulates for us. And the fact that this has not happened, for me, signals a real failure of the Western medical system for our people and continuing to have barriers for our people to enter into those professions and be successful in them. So I think that's the standard that we need to have, is that at this point, wherever there's a university that's on our territories, they need to be graduating every single year people from our communities and all of those professions to deal with this issue. So that's one of the challenges. And then I think, you know, there is work that is happening now, largely through the work of, you know, Indigenous physicians and allies, as Dr. Anderson explained, but some of that work has to do with racism in the healthcare system too. We know that in residential schools, Indigenous children were experimented on by physicians. There's never been an apology for our people by the medical profession that has caused harm on Indigenous children, and I think that is something that needs to happen. And the other part of that is recognizing that when there is harm, that it needs to be addressed in a culturally appropriate and safe way, using restorative-based processes like talking circles, restorative-based justice with our elders and medicine people to address that harm that was caused to that patient and the family by the health system, by health professionals, and they need to be held accountable by their governing bodies that provides them their licenses. And so I think this is the next step of dealing with that, because it has not regulated itself up until this point. People have not lost their licenses, and if that's what it takes, then I think that those are the steps that we need to take as a community, which really means that we need to hold those leaders and organizations to account politically at the political level as well.
Thank you. I think we have another question over at mic 3.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Tansei. My name is Delma McLeod. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and when I was working up north, I had to work in long-term care, and I noticed, and I said this yesterday to a group, but I noticed that our elderly are coming in now that were raised in residential schools, and suddenly they're being brought into another institution where they're told what to do. They have to line up for food. Many of them have dementia or the beginnings of dementia, and they're afraid. I often felt alone as the nurse there because nobody else really understood what I was trying to say of how extra care our elderly need. And so I'm trying to get the word out because I'm very passionate about this, that our people aren't forgotten when they're going into long-term care, and how they do need this extra support. And many people have that that mind thought of it was a long time ago, they won't care, but they do. And I've had people breaking down, talking about things and just witnessing their pain and their anguish. And I just want the word out there for people. So what can we do as a healthcare system to really push this so that, and people that are coming into long-term care aren't even that old, because as we say, you know, there's not a lot of diabetes, they're missing limbs, and it's just there's a lot of health issues. So I just want to get the word out. So, miigwech.
Thank you. I think you bring up a really important point in that when people are brought back into these institutions, they can be re-triggered into that cycle of trauma that they've experienced. I experienced that when I step into a hospital or like an acute care facility because of the violence I experienced as an Indigenous learner and as an Indigenous physician. So I can't imagine what it's like for other people that have experienced, you know, way worse things than I went through as a learner because it was already bad enough. And so I think we need to remember that, you know, our elders and people are going to go through those experiences, and that really speaks to the importance of having trauma-informed care that we teach within those programs. And we know that that is not done. At an individual level, we can do that. You know, I think Marcia and I do that. And there's basic principles like telling people exactly what you're going to do, creating a safe environment for them, doing things that you normally wouldn't do. So like you know, right now this little boy that I'm seeing, you know, he has like a little wart on his eyelid, and I have to put liquid nitrogen on his eyelid, which is like crazy AF and freaky for any person to have like liquid nitrogen coming at their eye. And, you know, using a trauma-informed perspective, you know, as adults, we can all sit around and say, you know, you have to do this many amount of times, or you're going to come back and it's going to get bigger. But any amount of rationalization is not going to address anything for him because he's in his trauma response. So we have to make him feel safe. So what I did is I have a little dog, her name is Lucy, and I bring her into clinic and I put her beside him so that he can, you know, hold her, and she sits on his chest, and, you know, the mom like kind of covers the area that I'm going to be going on, and he feels safe. We bring down his autonomic nervous system and get him back into his body like I talked about. And those are the things that we need to bring, which is really speaking to how we need to have that humanity in healthcare. We need to bring those practices back as a routine part of our healthcare. And often I think we do the best in our community, which means we need to have long-term care facilities for our elders in our community so that we're not shipping out our sources of knowledge to a non-Indigenous community and our people are just, you know, getting old in those places. We need them in our own community.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have some spaces in Manitoba in First Nations communities, certainly not in every community, so I completely agree with that. We have one space in Winnipeg, but we also have a lot of our relatives in non-Indigenous led personal care homes or long-term care facilities. And so I really appreciate that point. Occasionally I get invited to meetings on aging or dementia, and I, to be honest, had not thought of that. So that is something I'll also keep front in mind and make sure we're asking, because like James said earlier, we're talking about survivors of a genocide. And so we can't think about them the same way we think about maybe older non-Indigenous people, and we have to support them with that experience in mind.
Oh, we have another question over at number 3.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alma Hart. I'm a band counselor for MCCN. I'm sitting at a table with 2 of my community members, and they wanted me to come ask a few questions for them. One was, is there any resources out there to intervene in a family member's addiction, some family supports, and the other one is how do we address sicknesses when we are sent home with Tylenol on the reserve, because that's the lack of care in our communities is below standard. I also wanted to share an experience I encountered throughout my journey. I moved home a few years back with an education to make a difference in my community. And when I got home, I experienced a culture shock because everything I left behind when I was a teenager came back to me as an adult, as a mother. And when I was going through my childhood memories, how I was reflecting back on everything that I've been through, going through homelessness, not realizing that I was impacted by a diesel spill, the loss of our culture and our language and our community, and just all these things came flashing back to me, and it put me into a depression. And I'm currently living in my mom's trailer right now, so I can relate to the intergenerational effects of residential school, because my parents are survivors. And as an adult, listening to their stories, it means a lot to me, them sharing. And I asked them yesterday to discuss their journey to be recorded so that it's documented. And what I wanted to capture was their experience, and then I want to go do the interview so that it captures the intergenerational impacts. So I have parents that live here in Winnipeg. They just moved from our community because they wanted to make space for their grandchildren and to bring them here to get a better education. And when I think about them leaving their ancestral land because they harvest medicine, they have a cabin out there, they've been taking up to 20 kids every summer, asking for supports. And they knew that this day was gonna come, and they've been asking for the community support for the last 20 years. And now they're getting old, and they're not being able to exercise their culture and their traditions and their livelihood in the bush because they're getting to that age, and all they wanted to do in the last 20 years was to teach us to pass that down. So my message here today is for a lot more supports to be put out there towards our ancestral lands and to occupy, and to utilize people like my parents that are here in the city that can go to our local resources or to help teach these medicines, and to encourage our young ones. And I'm so happy that as an adult they're able to share that, their stories and their teachings and their language. And that's all I want to say. If you can answer those two questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing part of your story and your parents' story too. And I think it just echoed some of what you said earlier, James, around we need to make sure we have the opportunity to learn from our older relatives before they're gone, because they have such valuable knowledge. And I was thinking too about like how the chronic underfunding for housing and education has kind of put the situation in where your parents had to leave the community and come to the city, instead of there being enough housing and resources to support them to stay on their ancestral lands and for their family and grandkids to be there and learning from them and getting that good education both in schools and from them. So just to note that and I think, James, you said this earlier too, it's not just healthcare resources that we need, it's all of it, everything that's been disrupted, like lots of resources for that education and housing and other supports too. In terms of people with substance use and family supports, a resource that I look at often is from the Thunderbird Partnership Foundation and Dr. Carol Hopkins, and they do run, like it's the part of NADAP, right, with the culture-based healing programs, and there are some family-based programs. There used to be one in Seguin. I'm not sure what happened to it during COVID, but they do have some family-based addictions treatments through the Thunderbird Partnership Foundation. And in the other question around not getting good care in the nursing station, I'm assuming it is in your community or the health center. There's no easy answer to that. It's really disappointing and it's unfair. Part of what I like to advocate for is that health quality actually gets measured. So when people have bad outcomes, we can look back and say, well, they came and all they got was Tylenol. Why is that? And so people can be held accountable for not providing high quality care, not getting a proper diagnosis before just sending someone away with Tylenol. And so we'll need to keep advocating for that. One trick that I've heard some people use, and it can be really helpful, is to have our relatives make sure that they asked for diagnostic tests like maybe x-rays or blood work, and the provider refused to provide it, and make sure that the provider writes that down in the chart, because the medical records also create a sense of accountability. And so as we work on the system changes, one tool we can use for advocating for ourselves is, yes, to make sure the providers document when they refuse to give us the health care that we ask for.
Thank you. We have a question in the middle here.
Yes. My name is Christina Linklater. I'm from Pakiroagan, Manitoba, Matthias Cologne Band. For 2 days, I've been listening to the people. I was taken away at the age of 4. I came home when I was 11. I was put into a sanatorium in Brandon, Manitoba. I forgot about my family. I didn't know I had parents, brothers, sisters, cousins, kokums, and musums. I am Cree. My parents and my grandmothers taught me how to speak Cree. Nihidaw nida. Sipihupidisu isku tigawin. My spirit name is Blue Thunderbird Woman. I follow the culture. I was taught by the nuns and the priest at the age of 11. I didn't know how to read or write. I didn't know my ABCs. I didn't know what 1 + 1 was. But the most important thing was I understood the English language. And the sad thing was I didn't understand my mom. Because every child in our reserve spoke Cree, straight Cree. And I was the only one that could speak English. So when I went to school, I was fortunate to understand the English language. So I picked up my ABCs, my 1, 2, 3s. I worked hard. At the age of 17, we were told we cannot go to school anymore because we were adults. Take care of yourself. So I started working. I made $3 a day being a maintenance, sweeping the floor, doing laundry for the nuns. The memories that it's scary to look back. At one time, Well, I went to school. We had a classroom down the basement. When I entered that door, I could hear children crying. I stopped. I said, is this real? Am I hearing things? So I went downstairs and I opened the door slowly. We all had beautiful long hair, the boys and the girls. We had braids, but that day they cut all our hair. They shaved the boys' head. All the boys had bald heads. And our hair was up to here. And I could see all that hair piled up right in the middle of our classroom. During the time I spent sanatorium, I met Inuit friends there from Greenland, Nunavut. They were my sisters, they were my friends. And they would disappear in the middle of the night. And I would ask the nurses, where did my friend go? And she would say, well, your friend went home last night. I said to myself, wow, that's good. She went home to her family. Today, I don't know what happened to my friends. I grieve for them because they were my friends. Day school affected me. Sanatoriums where people disappeared, my friends disappeared. I don't know where they are today. 60 Scoop, my first child was taken away. Could have been 57. I don't know whether he's alive or not. I don't know if I have grandchildren. I don't know if he's homeless or dying. I don't know. Those are the things that I have carried. I will be 75 years old, May the 2nd, 1948. I'm a teacher. I only went to grade 7, but I went back to school. I went to university. I've got 2 degrees, teacher and a social worker. I still teach today, high school, 9, 10, 11, and 12. The first year I taught was 5 years ago. I was given a task to teach our history. I don't know how many times I wanted to resign because it opened so many wounds. But I stayed because I knew in my heart that our children, our students, need to hear our stories. My story. It's real. I said to myself 5 years ago, so this is real. It happened. I still teach our way of life, our culture. I love going camping, boat ride, because I've seen my grandmothers, my grandparents. They were trappers. They were fishermen. They were gatherers. And that's where I come from. And I told my boss before I came here, I said, as long as I can teach, I'll be there. Because our students need to learn about our way of life, our culture. And with that, thank you. But I would like to sing a song. It's part of healing. I sing this song during the graduation or feast or powwows. That was at least 15 years ago we started our powwows around dances. It was hidden. We weren't supposed to do that because of the Catholic system. But here I am. There's quite a few elders here from Pagirawagan. I'm so happy to see this for you, for everyone. The lost children, the beautiful children. I have to sit down. Before I sing, I want to share with you what I have written last night. When I went home, I have 95 likes from last night. 95. I could go for 1,000. Why not? Yesterday was a painful journey, a painful awakening that shattered my shield. The pain in itself is so much real. I am unable to hide it no more. My unresolved, painful drama is so raw that I couldn't fathom how I could have survived this long without breaking into 1,000 pieces. I asked myself 1,000 times today, how did I do this? How was I able to go on? Yes, it is real. The nightmare which I have hidden for so many centuries. The little ones, the little children have touched my heart, my very soul. The very core of my whole existence. They have awakened something deeply hidden in my inner child's memory. I wanted so desperately to push it back into the very core of my childhood memory, but I didn't. I wanted so desperately to heal, to surrender. I have no other choice, no other place to hide. But to face the hidden, shattered pain I have hidden for so long, I have buried it. Oh, so long ago, I have witnessed my childhood friends, the Inuit friends of mine, disappear in the middle of the night. Where's my son, my firstborn? I have no idea. He would be 57, maybe he's alive, I don't know. Oh, where are they? But I continue to search daily, every day, every minute. I look around. When I travel a lot. I look around, hoping to see a glimpse of my lost friends, my son, my firstborn. For centuries I have searched, but without success. All I see is empty shadows, but I continue to grieve. For my lost child, my friends, I could not stop my tears today. I cried so ever silently, my heart shattered. My whole body wanted to scream, but I kept silent. My tears falling so gently down my wrinkled face. Gosh, I asked myself, how did I ever survive for so many years without breaking into 1,000 pieces? How did I survive without losing my soul, my broken heart, my broken humanness? My inner child. I know now I must continue on my journey, for I cannot turn back time. No. I must keep going. I must tell my story, for I want to heal. I want to journey on. I want life, for I have chosen life. I want to smile, to laugh, to sing, to dance, to continue loving and caring for those I hold so dearly in my heart. Yes, I must carry on. I must journey on so softly and gently on Mother Earth's garden. For the little ones have awakened my sleeping spirit. Today it was meant to be. I must continue on. I love you all. This is a song. Think about the loved ones. I was gifted to sing when I was broken, when my heart was shattered long ago. 30 years, I've been going on my healing journey. I went to sweat lodges, ceremonies. That's when I started loving who I am. I love my life. I love who I am. Akukum, 74, 75 May. I got 40 grandchildren and 36 grandchildren. I am so gifted and thankful. Hey,
Miigwech. Thank you for sharing your song and your words and reminding us of those that speaking for your friends. Miigwech. We have another speaker over on my right.
Oh, first of all, I want to thank Elder Linklater for sharing us her deep thoughts, her feelings, of her experience in residence school. Kaya ask commitment, Linklater. Pichaleka tatamiskat, kisiyamiyan. It's a good thing that Elder Linklater spoke first before me, because this is exactly what I was going to talk about. Stories like her that are so common across our country. She's not alone. I can really state for certainty that every one of us here shares similar stories, and that is what brought us here. I was intrigued when I looked at the theme of this gathering, national gathering on unmarked graves. Back home, we have a relative, a Robinson. That is one of the children that didn't make it home. My name is Raymond Robinson. I'm from Pimitsikamak territory, Cross Lake. And I was listening to you physicians talking about your shared experience and your shared expertise in your field, and how you are doing your best to bring all of us home to our natural state of mind of who we were prior to colonialism. And as I was listening to you, you're alluding to the programming and servicing with respect to, I guess, the overall health umbrella of how it seems to be, according to your comments, that a lot of our servicing and programming is being administered by non-Indigenous people. So my question is, and it could be a comment as well, is how is it that we ever going to be able to come home and really heal if the system, the health servicing is still run and being administered by non-Indigenous people in all fields, leading it? You too are a prime example of where we should be going. Us, Indigenous people, administering our own health system, because we will understand ourselves. Who will understand better than us what we're going through? When we share, for example, when Elder Linklater shared her experience, if she told that to the non-Indigenous people, will that non-Indigenous person really understand what she's talking about, where she's been, knowing that non-Indigenous people was never there, never experienced that? And I've been an advocate over 40 years in trying to bring up to par on the way the governments at both levels have been dealing with us, whether it be education, health, social welfare, whatever. They're all the same. So until, and I mean until, the time comes when we here gathered and out there will ever administer our own, whatever it is, we will never be fully healed. I guarantee that. You talk about losing language. Yes. How do you lose language? By allowing the non-Indigenous people to run programmings. I travel across Canada, and I've seen a lot of programming and servicing, primary schools, doing their best to teach at the primary level the language. Like I see it all over sprouting. It's a good thing. We need to do that. This is how we will ever be able to fully, absolutely heal from within when we look after our own. Until then, good luck in healing. Because if programming and servicing is done by non-Indigenous people, you'll never get anywhere. This is what got us here in the first place. You talk about genocide, colonialism. They talk about reconciliation. Do they even know what the word means? Reconciliation. This is just a word. Reconciliation to me means giving back everything that they've done and doing everything, every single aspect of whatever it is that they did, including what we are gathered here for today, unmarked grace. Where are they today? I was talking to the Indigenous Crown Relations. They're a little bit shared of my experience while they were there, just to give a little taste of who we are, what we are. And I was really moved to hear Elder Linklater speak so eloquently, full of spirit. You could really feel and sense where she is. And I pray, and I will pray for her that she will find her lost son. Like many of us here lost a son or a daughter. That's what brought us here. Wanted to know where is my son? Where is my daughter? Where is she? Where are they buried? They're somewhere out there. I'd like to know where, so I got a peace of mind. That I can go into the spirit world, knowing I know where my lost relative is now myself too. And I encourage you, you young woman, you young man, to continue your path in doing your best to bring all of us back to ourselves, to our original selves. To learn to decolonize ourselves, our minds, our spirits, our physicality, our emotions, and restore ourselves to our natural state of who we are. I am in the new. Sige mag tatigi kayo gusto ko tutay. Ikata wanita at gusto. Kay sinaniwetsik. Minta gistenita kita kautsitsik. Kita wetsita, tagawitsita at gusto tinimyo tagawitsiatsik. Tagagiso kamuatsik. Just to say in English form, I said, I come from Cross Lake, what they do is Cross Lake in English language. And I'm proud to be from there. I speak my language, and I'm proud that I grew up to speak my language. I do my best to ensure that my kids speak their language. I encourage them. And I encourage them to be respectful, to follow the teachings of our ways, the Niha people, and always be that way. And thank you very much, for allowing me to speak. And I will pray for all of you guys. Think later. May I borrow your drum for a while? Elder, can you come and drum for me? I'll just share a song. This is what I sing when I think about our children that are out there. Thank you. That are out there somewhere. Many times I don't sleep at nights wondering where our children are. There was over 138 Indian residential schools across Canada. How many have we done in terms of groundbreaking training radar so far? And how many have we found already? By the thousands and thousands and thousands. How many more are still out there? So think about that. Mama Tawima, Besawe Bena, Besawe Bena, Mama Tawima, away, away, away. Away, 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 Mama Tawima, Kite Magina Wena, Kite Magina Wena, Mama Tawima. Away, 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 Mama Tawima, Bentawina, Bentawina, Mama Tawima, away, away, away.
Miigwech, Raymond. Thank you. All right, we have one more question over at mic 3.
Hi. My name is Selena Castell. Thank you, Christine. That was so much emotions that came out of that song, but I still love your Kimusum song more because that one really touched me more than ever because your song at that time really hit us hard when we brought me, these young, at that time I was young, to our First Nation Reserve High Rock when you were saying Kimusumino. I am actually here in regards about you doctors sitting here in a panel. In regards about our health, especially the sanatorium in the 1900s, earlier on then, are no different from today. Why I say that? Because 6 years of my life with my son, I 8 months ago, I lost him. And it's no different what it was like to see your son to be fighting for his life every day, day out. And, you know, as First Nation people, right away we are told, you're not a mother. We are pushed aside. And I fought that system. I fought hard because I was First Nation. I wasn't going to let them put me down because I used their mandate on them. And this day, our First Nation children are finally being looked after because of the way me, myself, Elizabeth, with her daughter, our disability children, we keep forgetting about disability children because there were so many of them in the sanitarium. Like I said yesterday, I had the privilege, can't say privilege because I was a shock to see that book. While I was working with Terrence Head, my boss, who taught me what residential school really was. And the hardest part, as Christine brought out, was to tell a mother that her daughter was still alive. I had to use my language at that time. You know, as a mother, and shocked in that way too, I heard the silence of the mother that time too. As like I heard my grandfather when I asked about his brother, why he went into the sanitarium and never came back. Like they said, he was going in there to go get Tylenol for his sick parents at that time. And this Tylenol is such a, I don't know what to say about that Tylenol. It's like, it's a that has to quit big time. But anyways, what I'm trying to bring out to your panels is we need more nurses, we need more respiratory technicians within our First Nation. We need so many of them because right now our children don't have a voice in that hospital, even at the Health Science Center. There's only a few that are First Nation at work in that environment. And we need to push harder to bring more of our First Nation in. 5 years of my life living in that hospital, it taught me how to be a respiratory technician. It also taught me what type of diseases there is in viruses and bacteria. You know, all this time I thought there was only one pneumonia. I thought all this time, but there are so many viruses that we don't, acknowledge. And same thing with the bacteria. Mistahe, musiwan, yago maagusiwan. Yago minapugawin situ tama tanta tiumagi ko yamote sapi magutigo maagusiwan. Gawin situ tama to learn from our leading doctors, we start to bring that forth and share it to our people. There's different types of COVID. There's different types of pneumonia. There's different type of cancer. And we need to bring more of it because residential school did take our children away from us, took my ancestors away. When I asked my grandfather, how far did you travel to go get Tylenol? And his response was, Wado. We took a dog sled from Pagarawagan to Guy Hill in a sanatorium. That's far. Now imagine our ancestors paddling these rivers, because that time we had 5 rivers. So let's bring back the strength that our ancestors had and show our young people or our elders it's never too late to educate ourselves. And let's bring our nurses and our doctors, our disease team to show us this path for our children. We need that big time. We need that voice in the hospitals. Igose.
Thank you. Thank you for your words. Thank you so much. I want to thank all the speakers that were speaking on the floor today. Thank you for sharing your words and your knowledge and the reminders. So we'll end our session for this particular session, and I want to thank James and Marcia for presenting and sharing your words with us. Again, I say this with the youth, and I also say this with our Indigenous doctors. It's a promising future, and thank you for charting that path forward. Thank you. So let's give a round of applause for everybody.